Lashana Tova, everyone. It's great to be able to share this moment with you and with our Mayor, Steve Adler. And the Mayor has graciously consented to spend some time with us talking about his connections between his Jewish roots and understanding of Jewish tradition and governance, and how the Jewish tradition may play a role in the way he views governance in our city. As we all know, Mayor Adler has been our mayor now for, what, 6 years? Has it been 6 years now? Almost. And is also has the distinction of being the first mayor in a 10-1 system, which has made his office perhaps more influential than in the past, and a greater opportunity to set a tone for our city than perhaps mayors have had in the past. And that's going to play into our discussion a little as well. So, well, kind of as we go through, we'll talk about your biography in different ways, but let's begin at the beginning. You're not a native Texan, are you?
Not. I was born in Washington, D.C., in the city. Not many people are.
What?
Up in D.C. I didn't come to Texas till law school.
Okay. And you went to Princeton undergrad.
I did.
Okay. Growing up in Washington as a kid, from other conversations, I know you had a bar mitzvah. Tell us a little bit about the role Judaism played in your upbringing.
Well, I didn't grow up in a family that was very religious. My real exposure to the Jewish religion came from my great aunt and great uncle, who were, and my aunt Esther and Uncle Chaim were very dear to me. But in my immediate family, while we were very culturally strong, we did not have a lot of religious ties. I did not grow up with a family that belonged to Temple. So I was probably, I don't know, 10, in that range, and decided that I wanted to get bar mitzvahed, and went to my father and told him that that's something I wanted to do, and was ready to do whatever I needed to do in order to be able to qualify. So our family then joined a temple, so that I could get bar mitzvahed. I then stayed as temple members. My older brother and sister both confirmed in that Reform temple, as I was too, subsequent to getting bar mitzvahed. But culturally, I think that the values that are important to me in the religion were always really important and taught growing up.
Now, you chose law as your career path. That's what brought you to Texas to study at the University of Texas Law School. Talk a little bit about that choice, if you would. Where did that come from? What did you want to accomplish with a legal career?
You know, my first memories of law probably were watching Perry Mason, and it always seemed, you know, he was great and did good and resolved things, and you know, being in front of a jury, that just had a lot of appeal to me on lots of levels. As I got older and went through high school and into college, I think I got a greater appreciation for the tool that a law degree can be, regardless of how you use that tool. And for somebody that really didn't know what they wanted to do specifically, but had a deep passion for justice, and for trying to do right and do good, law became, like I said before, a tool, a way to be able to realize to be able to realize that in lots of different ways. So without knowing in what way, law school seemed like a good first step.
Okay. So thinking back on the times when you were in law school and maybe shortly thereafter, what were the great issues of the day that you were concerned about? What were the things that when you were talking about doing justice, what did that mean in that context?
Well, so I graduated in law school in '82. So we had gone through the tumultuous '70s in a period of time. I think that there were a lot of discussions then about the appropriate role for government. We had civil rights movement that had been a big part of everyone's lives in the '60s that now seem to not to be stalled somehow. Um, you
Mm.
know, uh, I'm not sure that period of time had the real standout um, uh, kind of civil rights constitutional issue. I mean, lots of them, but um, it was my awakening. I mean, in that period of time, it was my opportunity to be out of an academic setting and into real life and into actually being able to do things that impacted people's lives.
So let's talk about that. You, the course you chose after coming out of law school was to focus on civil rights. What form did that take at that stage, and how did you get involved in you became chief of staff to a state senator? So how did you get involved in politics?
Well, when I was in law school, um, I was working my way through school, so job was always real important to me. As a law student, I got a clerkship in a small firm that was doing eminent domain law, representing landowners whose property was being taken by the government, and developed an expertise in that area of the law by virtue of that's where my job was. I think I probably just as easily could have been in any other area of the law, but that was the clerkship that I had, and that was key to me graduating. Um, it was a great law firm to be with because in law school you can get a learner's permit, kind of like a driver's learner's permit, and so long as you're with someone who actually has a driver's license, you can drive the car earlier than you have your license. Same thing with law. And I had a law firm with a partner that was willing to go into court and just sit there while I could try cases, which I loved. So I was in a courtroom doing that work before I had the degree, and that area of law I stayed with. It's the one that paid the bills and helped us establish the life. Um, but I also got involved with the reason that I wanted to go to law school to start off with. So right out of law school, I started working with the Austin Human Rights Commission. I was representing mostly workers that were filing equal employment opportunity cases, EEOC cases. I was representing a lot of minority workers who were claiming discrimination. I tried cases in federal court related to that. I represented women who were bringing sexual harassment, workplace harassment cases. Developed a little bit of reputation back then for bringing those cases in state district court instead of federal court as assault and battery cases on behalf of women that might have been chased around a desk and caught. Um, um, so that was the area of law that I did, and um, that was the kind of thing that I had wanted to go to law school to do. And I think that in that practice, I was able to change people's lives as well as to teach people that needed to learn that past practices weren't right, that there was a sanction and a penalty associated with not growing and learning. So I think I was able to change some of the companies in the city.
So how did you become chief of staff to a state senator?
Well, one of my closest friends in law school was a fifth generation El Pasoan. And when I graduated, I stayed in Austin doing that combined practice. He went back home to El Paso, and 20 years later, ran for state senate. As a friend, I helped him get elected on the campaign. My real first taste of state politics. And when he got elected, he asked me to help him set up his office. So I became his chief of staff and general counsel. I was a good deal for him because he didn't have to pay me to do that job. It was a great job for me because he met, the legislature meets once every 2 years for 5 months. I had a wonderful law partner who basically let me leave the office during the day. The only one that really paid a price for that was Diane, because I get up early in the morning. Elliot stayed at our home as senator, and we would go to meetings in the morning, work all day. In the evening, I would drop him off at the legislative receptions, and then I would do my law practice and get up the next morning. So my law partner was great. I was having great fun. Elliot had the help, and Diane just never saw me.
Gee, it sounds like a familiar scenario.
Right. But that was also a fascinating work because it was the same kind of work. And what intrigued me about that was again having a larger platform, more access to more tools, an increased opportunity to impact people's lives. I spent a lot of that time working on school finance issues. Texas has an archaic school finance system and really lacks designed to drive equity in so many ways falls short. We've never paid teachers what teachers should be paid. Our spending per capita for kids is way too low. So I spent a lot of that time working on education issues, finance issues, access to education issues, recognizing that education is the great equalizer and provides opportunities for people to realize their potential. So that was my focus there, and that was a great place to be until the politics started changing and a progressive Democratic senator started getting invited to fewer and fewer meetings because his vote was less and less important as the balance, partisan balance in the Texas Senate shifted.
Yeah.
So I pulled back. I thanked Elliot for the opportunity, but there wasn't much more I could do to help him when his real role was to just be the conscience of the Senate. So I pulled back from that in the mid-2000s.
So jump ahead a little bit. You decide to run for mayor. Why did you decide to run for mayor?
Because I didn't know any better. Diane and I had been involved in many of the boards and civic and arts nonprofit organizations in the city, and that was really fulfilling work. And again, harken back to the need I had since I was little to fight for justice and to help people. If you have that capacity and that opportunity and that privilege to be able to do that, then it's incumbent upon you to do that. Um, and there were two things probably I recognized. Well, three. The first was in working with those nonprofit groups and the like, there was a limit to how they could achieve their mission, in part being dependent on things that the city did or didn't do. And I realized that I could better achieve the mission that I was working for with each of those organizations if I was in a mayor role than I could on the boards. So it was, again, the next step up, better tool, increased reach. It was also at a time in Austin where we were changing the form of government. You mentioned it a second ago. We went to a district system from an at-large system, and 95% of organizations and governments that do that fail in the first 4 to 8 years. It devolves into a ward politic situation where suddenly people are not working together and decisions are being made by region. Soon, a majority of the aldermen or council members or precinct folks realize that they can get for their district the thing that district is asking for the last 30 years if they agree to that similar thing that 5 other districts have been wanting, without regard to what might be best for the city. Together they can deliver that thing. So I knew that and had seen that, and thought that it was really important that that not happen to Austin, that we couldn't afford that happening where we were back at that time 6 years ago. We were on a path, and we didn't need to disrupt that path. And I thought that my personal skills might be able to help the council not devolve into a ward politic system. So I thought that was an important time and moment, and that it was something that I could uniquely contribute to. And then the other one is I was getting kind of older, I think the third reason, and then I felt at some level guilty that I hadn't done as much as I thought that I could or should do for the community, and wanted to really deliver on that. So probably those 3 things made the decision.
And once you became mayor, I found it interesting to see the things you decided you wanted to focus on. I mean, there's a certain number, like the vast majority of things that are kind of forced on you because you're running the city. But the issues you chose to champion early on and have continued, in my eyes at least, reflect a certain amount of moral content. Primarily, the great emphasis on homelessness, first for veterans and then in general. Your and the council's ongoing support of LGBTQ rights. In these last months, the issue of racial justice has been kind of front and center. But you established a commission, a mayor's commission on systemic racism almost immediately after you came into office. So my point in bringing this up is it seems to me that you had a moral outlook about the role of government and your own role in society that you wanted to execute as mayor. I wanted you to comment on that.
Yeah, I think from the time I was little. I mean, I think that goes back to my parents. I think that I was taught I was taught about justice, and that became a guiding light, kind of a moral honesty associated with that is where I began. So you see that in the kinds of things I was involved in high school and college, the jobs coming out of law school, the work as chairing the local ADL body, and taking a leadership position there nationally. That search for that measure of justice was one of the chief reasons to run. So when I did get elected, one of the first places I focused on was the Eastern Crescent in the city, a term that everybody uses now that I'd like to think we actually moved into the general lexicon in that period of time. And there's been huge changes, societal, relative to then versus now. I remember that when we formed the Mayor's Task Force on Institutional Racism and Systemic Inequities, and we did it in response to the killing of David Joseph, the 17-year-old child who was running down the street naked and then got shot in an encounter with the police. We were headed once again to gathering together the clergy for a meaningful conversation. And at some point you look up and you say, I'm tired of meaningful conversations. What can we do to actually change things on the ground? Formed that task force. I was surprised at the time the number of people that called me up to say, this is a really good thing that you're focusing on not just the police issue, but that same issue in police, but also access to capital and housing and healthcare delivery and education, that you're doing it not to redefine the problem once again, but to actually come up with specific things that we can do. I want to be part of that, but can you name it something else? Me. Say, well, institutional racism, it suggests we're all racist. I'm not a racist. And it's just too incendiary. Can you call it something else? Which became all the more reason to call it what it is. And I think it's interesting now where we are, just several years later, that those are words now that everyone is comfortable using and everyone uses those words. And, that's a step forward, but only to the degree that we're actually willing to translate that into real action. But all the work that I had done, the civil rights work, the ADL work, the work out in the community, uh, all pointed to being, when I was mayor, the ability to be able to drive justice and access to opportunity and understanding the difference between equity and equality in terms of making sure that people could realize their potentials, breaking down and removing systemic barriers.
Talk a little bit of the other area that has really been a focus for the city has been the homeless issue, um, in ways that I think other cities have not. Um, where did that interest? Well, I know that you and Diane were involved in community first, uh, as private citizens. Where did that interest come from?
Well, the folks in our community that are experiencing homelessness are a pretty vulnerable community. They need support and help. It's also a community that is really relegated to non-attention historically in this city. People see the the community of folks experiencing homelessness now. We haven't appreciably added to the number of people. They were here, which makes you have to confront the question, well, where were they the last 10 or 15 years if they were here and I just didn't see them? And what kind of conditions were they living in? And how could I be in a city of such wealth and such opportunity with so many people who apparently are living somewhere that I don't see in conditions that are horrific. Uh, we homelessness became a big issue in this community. When the city council started taking action, but it was already a big issue in our city. When I came into office, there were a lot of people who thought my number one priority was to fix the area around the arch. That's when I got elected. Uh, in those first several years, I was starting to go to more and more neighborhood association meetings out in the community where people didn't want to talk to me about zoning anymore or flooding. They wanted to talk to me about the anxiety and anger they were feeling being proximate to one of the encampments that obviously these couple thousand people were living in and around the city. Anger like I had not seen before, people threatening to take their guns and to fix the problem if I didn't fix the problem. So it was something that was building. You could just feel that this was going to really blow up if we didn't do anything. And we were in a city where the way that we dealt with homelessness was making no sense. We gave 16,000 tickets out to people in 2016 for not for a crime for doing anything that was endangering public safety or public health, but for experiencing homelessness, for being there. You know, business would call up, say there's someone out front scaring people away, which is not good. We need to do something about that. The police would arrive and give someone a ticket 16,000 times. Of course, very few of those 16,000 tickets result in someone showing up in court the following Thursday to respond to their ticket. And what that meant is that 6 months later, 8 months later, when that person was being helped to get into a job or into an apartment, they wouldn't qualify because now they had an arrest warrant. They had failed to come up and respond to the ticket that they had. So we stopped writing tickets. That didn't work. Then we just started threatening tickets. Police would show up and say, "I'm going to write you a ticket unless you move," um, knowing that actually writing the ticket wouldn't help. But the threat was effective. The person would get up. She would start gathering her stuff. She would say, "Officer, please don't give me a ticket. Please don't give me a ticket. Look, I'm moving. I have all my stuff. Officer, where should I go?" And the officer would honestly say to her, "Ma'am, I don't know where you should go. I just know you can't be here." So she would get up and she would move. But wherever she would move, she was equally violating the law. It doesn't help. So you look at cities like Los Angeles, that has 64,000 people experiencing homelessness in LA County, over 40,000 people experiencing homelessness in the city. Or a city like Seattle, smaller than Austin, 6 times as many people experiencing homelessness. Those are the cities that you read about. Portland, that 12 years ago created um, uh, a place for people to go to camp, temporarily until they could be moved to somewhere else. And those camps still survive today, 12 years later. You have camps in LA that police don't go into. They have their own form of justice and policing. It's like Mad Max in some of these places. So I went to the cities and I said, we don't want to be you. If you're mayor of those cities, I don't even know what you do. The scale of your challenge is so great. What do you wish your city had done in hindsight 8 years ago to avoid being where you are today? And every city gave me the exact same answer, which was stop moving homelessness around. Stop saying you can't be here, go somewhere else without actually having a place for people to go. Stop hiding it where people don't see it. People come to me now and they say, look at this overpass, look at the trash and filth associated with that overpass. Absolutely important thing to bring to government attention. And we can't let that happen. And we have to do a better job of helping to clean up those areas. I understand that, but think for a second. If that happens under that overpass in the matter of a few months, imagine where that person was living for the few years before they made it to the underpass. Imagine what those places look like. And we've cleaned up a lot of them now as people are actually moving out of them. But in this city, those camps, before the council took any action to walk through those areas, you just would not believe, you would not believe that those places existed in our city. So really the work associated with homelessness has been to help a community that Caritas is 95% successful. If they can take someone off the street, put them into supportive housing, 95% of the time they are not back on the street 2 years later. So it's a challenge that drives at our base humanity, and there's actually an answer that we know that works. We just have to scale it and do it. So there's the humanity issue, the ethical and moral issue. I've had a dozen women come up to me sleeping under overpasses, which is not where we want people to be because we don't want people camping or sleeping anywhere in our city other than at home. But they would come to me, at least a dozen, and say, thank you. Until I could move into a place where I was seen and could be protected, every night in the woods and in the forest, my life was hell, and described just routines of being assaulted. It was just part of living. It was part of the routine of life. And I don't have the capacity now to send her back to that place, which means that place is no good. Sleeping under the overpass, also not good. We have to get these people into homes. So that's where we're moving now. But that was the answer from Seattle, Portland, and LA. They said, we're doing that now. The scale is so, I wish we had started 8 years ago. And I can remember being with the mayor of LA. And we went through this and he said, start housing people now. Whatever it takes, start housing people now. Get them the support services and get it sooner because we start creating this problem, right? Somebody has the perfect storm. They lose their spouse and their children and their job. And then they have a medical bill and they're being, or a car note or a repair, and now someone's chasing after them for a bill that they can't pay, and then they lose their apartment and they're on the street and there's no one for them to call. They've been disowned. And they reach out to the city and they say, okay, I'm newly on the street. I need help. Can you help me? Can you help me get into a place so I can straighten out my life? And our answer right now is we'll put you on the waiting list. We know that if that person is on the street for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, it's going to be harder to ever pull them back. But if they call on that first day and get on a waiting list in this city, it's a year and a half to find a place. We're creating a lot of the problem that they're dealing with because we're not dealing with it. Uh, so so you go talk to these places. I was with the mayor of LA, and the mayor of LA looked at me at the end of our conversation and he said, so again, remind me, how many people do you have experiencing homelessness in your city? And I said, más o menos, maybe 2,500. And he started laughing at me. He said, 2,500 in the whole city of Boston. I said, that's right, 2,500. And he said, make me mayor of Boston, I can fix homelessness. And it is, it's about resolve. But the city has not done a good job of demonstrating to the community that there is a path. We have not done a good job with encampments. We have not done a good job of managing shared public spaces, in part because we're trying to do something that is drastically different from where we were before. We're trying to align a whole army of volunteers and organizations that were out dealing this, but not necessarily dealing with it together. Uh, and now we're there, and now we have the things aligned, and now we have the money that has been pointed. We have the bond money that's been adopted. The council in this last 2 years of budgets has put significant investment toward that. We're going to start seeing the difference now, and we will be a much better city, and will never become LA and Seattle and Portland because we're acting sooner.
And you just mentioned something I wanted to take, another road I want to take you down. And that is that we've often talked about the fact that budgets are moral documents. And a good deal of the effort of the council for a good part of the year is to formulate the city budget every year. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about what you see as the moral component to that effort in terms of setting priorities, the council setting priorities for city spending.
Well, they're about moral. Budgets are moral documents, and they're about morality, and they're also about inertia, because budgets are hard to change. Once you have a budget, everything in that budget has a stakeholder group associated with it. So it's really, really hard to change budgets in any way. Uh, let's take the current debate over policing, because it's current and lots of people on lots of different sides of this issue. Uh, if you take a look at the literature and the studies that are happening now that address police, uh, it becomes real important to address policing in the context of public safety. It's much more, I think, appropriate for cities and communities to think about public safety than to speak about policing. Now, policing is an incredibly important part of public safety. And our police officers, by and large, are great people doing great work and making huge contributions to public safety in Austin. Austin is one of the safest big cities in the country. I think we're like number 4 or 5, and we're closer to number 1 than we are to number 6. And that's a position that we've had throughout my term as mayor. We're one of the safest places in the country. You know, there was just a Wall Street Journal article that pointed out that we have the second highest rate increase of homicides, which is true. And you hear people mention that article. What they don't mention is that same article pointed out that our per capita homicide second lowest of all of the cities that were addressed, including the other 4 Texas cities that are part of that same poll. When your homicide rate is so low and you have another 4 cases, it's a big percentage increase, which is what they were reporting. Now, any increase is too much, but even with that increase, Austin's second lowest homicide rate of all the cities participating. Even after that increase, we are a safe city, in part because of the people that live in this city, and because we have been attuned to the determinants of crime and not just responding to crime. Safety is the number 1 priority. We will not let that get compromised. But let's talk about public safety and then figure out what it is that we want our police to do as a component of driving and delivering public safety. Our police should not be how our community deals with poverty. We can't police poverty. We shouldn't be making our police officers on patrol be our social service uh, uh, agents. Right? We want them focusing on crime. We
Yeah.
want them focusing.
Yeah, you were talking about the example you gave a few minutes ago about the police role in homelessness. I mean, what really, that's a tremendous burden on the police to deal with an issue that policing doesn't really have any great effect on.
That's right. And a lot of the crime numbers that we see downtown, for example, crime numbers that we see uh, uh, are are people who are experiencing homelessness, not directed against people who are not, but directed against one another. It's We should have social workers in there. We should be taking those people off the street and putting them into homes. We want to lessen the load for our police officers so that they can focus on that. Maybe it means we need fewer officers on patrol if we were actually to take those duties away from them. Austin has one of the highest rates of shootings, of deaths, when our police respond to a mental health intervention call among cities. Not a number we should be proud of. And there are a lot of issues associated with that, de-escalation issues and the like. But for me, the primary issue is if we have a mental health call, we should have a mental health professional that responds to that call. Now, I understand there are situations where the police need to be there too because there's a public safety issue, and I understand that. But I would have the mental health professional on the scene being the person that's saying, okay, we need police to be able to do this. This is what I can do. That we should expand our mental health intervention. And other cities have done that, from the taking of the call to the responding of the call, being available for on computers to be able to get to that scene. And if we did that, that again is not a duty we should be having of our police department. Our police department should be the group that's downtown taking noise measurements outside of clubs to see who's violating noise ordinances in our city. Um, so when we look at public safety, let's look at public safety and let's figure out what we need to do. If Caritas is 95% successful taking people out of tents, off streets, and putting them in homes where they're 2 years later, why don't I increase the capacity of organizations like Caritas to take these folks off the streets rather than having my police have to deal with them over and over and over again? When I have my police and my fire department making calls that are medical calls associated with medical calls, maybe I should be expanding EMS so that they can be out there more and doing more preventative stuff and helping before crimes happen. Maybe I should be expanding EMS. You know, a woman gets battered at home and she's there with her kids. She has nowhere to go. So she knows that if she stays in there very long, she thinks she's going to get beaten again. She calls SAFE, wonderful organization, deserving of support in our community. She calls SAFE. She's put on a waiting list. They say, we can't take you out of the home right now. What if every time a woman got battered in her home, we were able to actually take her out? You know, sometimes police don't get called, you know, but maybe if there was a place for people to be able to go, if we provided that capacity, we would be a safer community.
Right.
If we look at public safety and not at policing, we're going to be a safer community. Otherwise, we're just churning an issue. But I recognize that makes people nervous and it creates anxiety. Change does that. So we have to do these things. And the only way to do them is in a budget. And oftentimes a budget is not a fine-tuned instrument, but the monitoring of it can be. We took action this past budget. We have the ability to be able to change that and modify that as we get information and data. We've set ourselves on an 8-month conversation about reimagining police. And I think that most of the community is with us to actually try to do something that fundamentally changes public safety in our community so that everyone feels safe. And I will tell you that in our current system, if you're black, you do not feel as safe as if you're white in this community with respect to how we're responding to public safety right now. And we have way too many. The disparate numbers of people that are arrested, in jail, and incarcerated is extreme. That is not something that is right or fair or makes us ultimately safer. But what I would say to the community is that we at a high level, we start dealing with those things in a budget. That's where you make those moral decisions. That's when you make those inertia decisions. But I can guarantee you that this council is focused on delivering and maintaining public safety.
When you did your State of the City address this year, you kind of set out, not kind of, you absolutely set out a vision for Austin's future, which was ambitious and compelling. And want to give you a couple of minutes to talk about that vision, your hope for what the city will be like well after your term as mayor is over.
I think I began in that, and by the way, it's on my website, mayoradler.com, if anybody wants to actually find it and read it or watch it. But I talked about where we are right now, and boy, I tell you, what an incredible time we're living in right now. You know, I keep waiting for the locusts to come next week. You know, it's been one challenge after another challenge that has fallen to us. Um, and the price that people are paying with the health crisis, with the virus, the economic crisis that's associated with that, the racial justice issues and the people dying that have precipitated, dying both in this city and in others that have precipitated the conversation. And there is a sense that, or there's an opportunity to just feel really overwhelmed by the difficulty that we're facing. Um, but in that difficulty, in having so many dreams put aside, there's a whiteboard that we have right now. an ability to be able to draw the city and our community the way that we want it to be, that is unprecedented. And some of the time, historically, the most significant moves forward toward justice and better society happen as a result of these kinds of times. You saw that in the Great Depression, leading to the New Deal. In Austin, we were going to be the manufacturing of the deal hub of the Southwest. They built one of the largest dams in the world on our lake, only to have a storm come by and take it all away from us and wash it downstream. And that land that may have been all manufacturing now is University of Texas land. We moved from manufacturing to ideas. Uh, but this is our moment to say we've just spent a lot of time at home because of the virus. We've learned a lot about ourselves. We've had more time with our family. We've also watched the disparate impact that this virus has had on Black communities, but especially the Hispanic community, in terms of the percentage of people that are sick, the percentage of people that are in hospitals, the percentage of people that are dying. And it happens now because of very conscious decisions that we made as a community 100 years ago and 125 years ago and 50 years ago, where we made conscious decisions to make those communities more susceptible to this virus whenever it would come. And we can't escape that. And we're not responsible for those decisions, but we are responsible for the impact of those. We have in our community Jews that lost fortunes and art collections to the Germans. And it's easy for us to understand after the war why it's important that as a community, those artworks are given back to them, that their property is restored to them. Well, we did that too. And we did that, and it was compounded generation after generation after generation in our community. And we see now the impact of what we wrought. And we have an opportunity to make good on that now. I wanted us to act in big ways. And I said, look, homelessness is a way for us to act in a big way. 40% of the people that are homeless, experiencing homelessness in our community, are Black. This is a race issue as much as any issue is a race issue. Let's fix that. We know how to do it. We know what works. Let's just resolve to fix it, and let's fix it. Yes, we're not doing it right yet. Yes, we have not figured out how we manage shared public spaces, but let's do it. Let's fix it and then move on down the road. On Project Connect, we have a chance as a city to actually provide opportunity for mobility all across our city. We have whole parts of our city, east side of our city, where the life expectancy is 10 years lower in Austin on the east side of our city than the west side of our city. In Austin, Texas, 10-year differential in life expectancy. Now, that's because of a lot of things, and it's because of a history, it's because of not having healthy food. It's also because there are people over there that have to commute 2 hours a day to and from their jobs, because that's what our transit system provides, and they can't afford the $10,000 a year it costs to operate a motor vehicle in this car in this city. So Project Connect, huge thing, great equalizer, incredibly equity driven, also does incredible things for the environment, and climate change also gives us a huge jobs program as we come out of the virus. But that is a big thing, and it's going to be before the voters in November, and I hope people vote for it. The policing issue. This is an opportunity for us to rethink public safety and how do we actually drive it, not for most people, but for all people in our city, and put ourselves on a path over the next 10, 20 years, 30 years that we can realize being our better selves. And then I concluded with the conversation about atonement. And I talked about atonement. Uh, Good conversation to have as we are now in the high holidays. But as a community, how do you atone for our responsibility in the increased death rate among blacks in our community from this virus, or the much higher rate of hospitalizations for Hispanics in our community, or the disparity in wealth in our community. How do we atone for that? And I think we need to. And I think that if we did that, if we recognized that, if we provided that measure of opportunity and true equity to people in our community, we would be a safer, fairer, more just, more magical, wonderful community to live in.
Yeah, and I hasten to add that when we do the Al-Hate, we do the confessional, we do it as a community. All those are we's. They're not individual, they're we's. And that's the way we fix things, is to recognize the inequities and then use our time, energy, and strength to be able to address those for real and to really change the world in which we live. So I'm going to do one last question. And that is, do you have any High Holy Day greeting for the Jewish community?
I don't know. Good yontif. It's I would just say, what an absolutely remarkable time of such opportunity we live in this moment. And as I talked about just a second ago, because so many lives have been so disrupted, there is no clear path. No one really knows what life looks like next. I mean, this is both our opportunity to celebrate a new year, a new time, a new decade, a new generation, a new path, but infused with the duality of the high holidays, which is also the day when we look and measure ourselves against the yardstick that we would impose on ourselves, knowing all that we can be. And this is that time for us as a community and as a state, as a country, and in many ways you feel right now as a world to do this. But I'll focus us just on our little town here in Austin. Let's make big choices that reflect the best of who we are.
Yeah. That is the essence of Teshuvah, turning to a better place. Mayor, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate this opportunity. It's to be able to spend a real substantial period of time and listen to the ideas and the approach that you brought to our city and to our lives. Thank you.
Rabbi, thank you.